Hello, I'm Ollie and this is CriminOlly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, extreme horror, westerns and two of my favourite authors. It's my weekly wrap-up. So this is my reading update for the first week of June, and I've started the month with a bang. I've had a very enjoyable reading week. I've got through 7 books, so I've got 7 things to talk to you about today, and a couple of things that are ongoing at the moment too. Not everything I've read has been perfect by any means, and I'll talk about that in this video, but it has been a fun reading week. You'll remember I'm splitting my TBR for June into 3 sections. The first of those is Westerns. So it is, of course, the month of June on the Range, the annual Western-themed reading event created by the fantastic Michael K. Vaughan. So I've got 3 Westerns to talk to you about. I'm also going to try and read some extreme horror this month. So I've got 3 extreme horror books to talk about. And then I've also got other things that I want to read this month. So I've got kind of a miscellaneous pot for those. So I've got 1 that I've finished and 2 ongoing to talk to you about from that pot, including 2 books by my 2 favourite authors. Before I get into any of that though, so I finished May, so Saturday of last week was the last day of May, and I finished May with a bunch of comics. So I'd got through the books I wanted to read for the month, and I just read comics all day basically, and it was lovely. I felt like a kid again. So I subscribed to 3 British comics, 2000 AD, Judge Dredd the Magazine and Commando. So I was a bit behind on reading all 3 of those, so I caught up with 2000 AD and Judge Dredd. So I had a few stories I hadn't read for those, and I had a bunch of Commando comics that I hadn't read. So I was a subscriber to Commando a while ago, and that subscription had lapsed, but I still had some from that subscription that I hadn't read. I've now subscribed again, so you'll see a book haul video from me later this week where I talk about a few of the Commando comics I've received recently. But this was kind of the tail end of my previous subscription. So I'm not going to show you all of them because you can see I read a stack. But probably the standouts for me were this one, Jungle Killer, which was a Vietnam Commando comic. So the Commando comics normally cover the Second World War, so it was interesting to see a Vietnam one. So that was really good. And what was the other really good one? Ghost Pilot. So this was a really interesting one about a bomber crew, an RAF bomber crew during the Second World War that's infiltrated by a German pilot. And it's about trying to guess who that pilot is. So it kind of had a mystery element to it. It was a really, really fun read. So yeah, enjoyed getting through these Commando comics and as I say, feeling a bit like a kid again last weekend. Right, so I'm going to talk through the books I've read now. Normally I just talk them through in the order that I read them during the week. But this week and probably for the other weeks this month, I'm going to split them into those 3 groups. So let's start with Westerns. So as I said, it's the month of June on the Range. Hopefully at least some of you are reading some Westerns as well. I've read 3 this week and really enjoyed all of them. So the first of those was Longarm and the Vanishing Virgin by Tabor Evans. Tabor Evans is of course a house name, so this one was actually written by an author called James Reesner, who, when I was looking at his profile online, is phenomenally successful, phenomenally prolific. He's written dozens and dozens and dozens of books, largely Westerns, but in other genres as well. I've read a few things by him and I've always enjoyed them, and this one was definitely no exception to that. Really, really fun read. So Longarm is a marshal in the Old West. This is Longarm book 245, so you can tell how long running the series was. In this one, he is hired to go and find a woman who was due to be married to a senator and has run away just before her wedding. And it's about him trying to track her down. There are loads of twists and turns along the way. A really, really fun read as you kind of get to understand why she's run away and the bigger stuff that's going on. So yeah, very, very enjoyable. And because it's a Longarm book, a couple of saucy scenes as well. So Longarm always ends up with at least one of the ladies he meets along the way. But in kind of a nice way. The women in these books always have agency. It tends to be them that initiate the encounters with Longarm rather than the other way around. So yeah, a really fun read. Next up then on the Western front was The Time It Never Rained by Elmer Kenton. This was fantastic. So this was recommended by Mark Hodder, the author, in a comment on one of my videos. It was so good. So this is not a typical Western in that it's set in the 1950s, and you know, normally the Western period we consider ends kind of around the time of the First World War. But this definitely had significant Western vibes, and it's based on truth. So it's based on a period in Texas when it didn't rain for like several years, and it's about the impact of that on a farming community, and in particular on one guy who's like a considered in the book to be like a typical Western, a typical Texan, in that he's just very stoic and just gets on with stuff. And one of the themes in this book is the fact that he refuses to take any assistance from the federal government during that period, and the impact that decision has on his farm and his family. This was so good. I really enjoyed it enormously. Really gripping, really moving, and you really come to love that central character. He's not perfect by any means, but a really brilliantly drawn central character. Thoroughly enjoyed it and really recommend this book. And then after that, my final Western of the month was a return to a series I've been reading since I started the channel. That's the Edge series by George G. Gilman. So this was book 23, Echoes of War. As you can see, this paperback copy I have, which I think I got in a job lot of Edge books, is very old and battered. This is a US edition, so George G. Gilman, the author, whose real name was Terry Harknett, was a Brit. Part of the kind of movement that was known as the Piccadilly Cowboys, so a bunch of British authors who wrote Westerns and tended to kind of pretend to be American. So yeah, this is an American edition. All the other Longarm books I've read so far, I think, have been in the UK editions. But yeah, this one is definitely falling apart. I was surprised it managed to survive me reading it. It's that battered, but a really fun read. This one has Edge, who's this kind of brutal, desperate character on a steamboat journey with, like, there's kind of spies on it. The steamboat gets attacked. There's like tons and tons of action and violence. These books are known for being extremely graphic, and that was certainly how they were marketed. So you can see on the back, the main word at the top there is brutal, and they marketed these books as the most violent Westerns in print. This didn't disappoint on that front, but was, you know, an enjoyable read. And the title Echoes of War refers to the fact that earlier on in the series there were a few books that covered Edge's time as a soldier in the Union Army during the Civil War, and this has some kind of throwbacks to his life then. So yeah, a fun read. So that's the Westerns done then. So in terms of extreme horror then, so the first thing I read for that was a short story. I will leave a link in the description to the video to Godless, which is the website I bought it from, where you can get a copy. It's currently like 99 cents, which is about 70p. So very cheap, and I highly recommend it. I thought this was excellent. So it's called The Eternal Flower of Your Soul, and it's by an author called Klaus Kinion. This is, I think, his first book. I kind of knew him through the extreme horror, or I can't remember what it's called now, Extreme Horror Lit, I think, subreddit on Reddit, where he's a very prolific and friendly and helpful commenter on that subreddit. So he's just published this short story. It was so good. So firstly, I really love the cover. I think he's done a fantastic job of the cover. But the story itself was one of the most horrible things I've ever read. It really was. Just thinking about it is making me feel slightly nauseous, but really brilliantly done. So sometimes with extreme horror, and I've made this criticism on the channel before, it feels a bit like unpleasant, but not in the way you want horror to be unpleasant, just a bit grimy and awful. And this definitely didn't feel like this. It was a really interesting concept. So the concept is that you are watching a DVD made by this woman who's like a Marie Kondo type character, so like a declutterer, someone who focuses on like your inner being and gets rid of all the crap in your life, basically. And she's made this DVD, and it has been immediately like dispatched to people. But what happens during the DVD, it's just her filming herself, is she basically gradually mutilates herself. So a really horrible concept, and it doesn't pull any punches at all. It's incredibly graphic, but I thought it was really well done and really effective and really kind of thoughtful and thought-provoking in a way that sometimes extreme horror isn't. So yeah, I really, really recommend it. I thought it was great, but do not read it if you have a weak stomach. It really is some of the most graphic and horrible stuff I've ever read, and I've read a lot of graphic and horrible stuff. So yes, that was the first thing I finished for my extreme horror week. The second thing is a book that is, I think, reasonably well, or very well thought of actually, in the extreme horror circles. I've seen lots of people praise it. It certainly gets talked about a lot. I thought it was awful. So it's a book called Survivor by an author called JF Gonzalez. So this is a book that's kind of about like snuff movies basically, but it's structured like a thriller. So it starts with this. So actually the prologue to this book was fantastic. So the prologue takes place in the 1950s, and it's almost like a short story in its own right about this interaction between a middle-aged woman and a high school girl. And I thought that was a really great start to the book. It's surprising, it's kind of shocking, but I thought it was really effective. And then you get into the rest of the book, which takes place in the 90s. And it follows this couple who are on they're like drive. I can't remember if it's like a long road trip, but they're driving basically, and this van starts like harassing them on the road, a bit like the concept for the Steven Spielberg movie Duel, based on the Richard Matheson novella. So that kind of concept, and it ends up, and this isn't a huge spoiler, it ends up with the husband of the couple getting arrested because of basically false claims made by the van driver that it was him who was behaving dangerously on the road. And it kind of spirals after that, with a woman being kidnapped by some people who are making a snuff movie. So some of this book is really, really horrific and horrible and like very, very graphic at times. But most of it's just really boring. So you've got like this thriller setup, which wasn't very well handled. It doesn't wring as much tension out of the kind of thriller concepts as it could have done. But the main problem with this book is you get these really lengthy scenes of just people talking to each other in completely unconvincing and not very interesting ways, and that just saps any kind of tension or shock value out of the book. And I just felt overall it just ended up feeling very unconvincing, quite ridiculous, and I just really didn't enjoy it. So I am considering doing a full review of it where I talk a bit more about exactly why I didn't like it. But yeah, I was left very, very unimpressed by it. And then the final thing I've read from the extreme horror front was this. A book that I cannot open on camera and show you the inside of this book because it is that graphic and appalling. So it's called Beautiful Monster, and it's by Maruo Suehiro. So this is a Iro Guru. I keep on saying that word wrong. Iro Guru. So this is a style of Japanese manga which is a blend of erotic and grotesque. That's what the Guru stands for. And this is definitely erotic and grotesque, but not erotic in the sense of being. When I think of the word erotic, I think of it as being, like pleasantly arousing or titillating. This is definitely not the case in this book. It has a lot of sex in it, which is why I can't open it and show it to you. But it's definitely not titillating or arousing. It's just appalling and disgusting. So this is a number of short stories. They're very, very strange, very weird. It reminded me a bit of kind of David Lynch or David Cronenberg. It's that kind of weirdness, but also that kind of obsession with sex that you see sometimes in those two directors' works. Really over the top and horrible and bizarre. But again, each of the stories felt kind of interesting and complete in its own right, in the same way that the Klaus Kinion short story I talked about earlier did. There's something that kind of taps into your psyche a bit on these, I think, in these stories. They're kind of nightmarish and hallucinatory and weird, but in a way that kind of sticks with you. So I thought this was a really, really interesting collection, and despite the fact it was really appalling and horrible, I'm glad I read it. Right, so that takes us to the other section then. So one book finished this week, which is by my favourite author of all time, Ed McBain, aka Evan Hunter. So this was an early novel by him called Big Man. So this is like a mob novel basically, and I think so. McBain / Hunter was born Salvatore Lombino, so he was the son of Italian immigrants to the States, and this definitely draws on that kind of Italian-American identity. So it's about a young guy, an Italian-American guy, who ends up like falling in with the mob for like not deliberately, it just kind of happens because of something that happens to him near the start of the book. And he becomes like an enforcer, basically. And it's about him like growing in power and stature, and his, the impact of that life on his relationships and things like that. So definitely kind of a bit of a morality tale. Had a fantastic ending, which I really enjoyed. Quite, so it came out in the 50s, so an early book by McBain, and definitely quite shocking and violent at times. There's one scene in particular which isn't particularly graphic, but I think is quite shocking. Not McBain's best book by any means, but it was interesting for me to see him doing something different. Typically his books are written from the perspective of the good guys, the police or detectives, whereas this one definitely written from the perspective of a bad guy, and I thought he did it really well, so I enjoyed reading that. So that's everything I've read this week then. I've got 2 things on the go at the moment, both again from the other category. So the first of those is The Descent by Jeff Long. So this is the pick for the CriminOlly book club this month. This is really good. So I am 130 pages in. It's a long book. It's like 600 or 560 pages. So I'm over a fifth of the way through. Really, really fun. So it's like that kind of disaster movie style of book where the first 5 chapters are all basically told from the perspectives of different characters as like mysterious events unfold. And the mysterious events in this book really are about the fact that there's like loads and loads of underground tunnels beneath the world, like all over the world, and they are populated by strange creatures. So it's got that kind of fun B-movie kind of a vibe to it. It's kind of like action science fiction, I suppose you'd call it, action adventure science fiction. So yeah, I'm enjoying this a lot so far. It's a fun read. And then less of a fun read is a book by the other favourite author of mine that I'm reading this month, and that is Stephen King. So this is his fantasy novel Fairy Tale. So this started really, really well. So I'm a bit over halfway through now. It started really well. So it's about this young guy, a high school kid, who meets this old man. So basically he's walking past the old guy's house. The old guy is having like a heart attack or something like that. And he manages to, he realises what's going on and manages to save him, and thereafter forms a friendship with this guy who's known as a bit of a recluse in the town. So you've got the first, the kind of opening third really is about their relationship, about their friendship, and you come to realise there's something a bit weird going on. And thereafter the book shifts into its kind of fantasy mode. And it's really like a homage to like Edgar Rice Burroughs, like the Barsoom books, like this idea of there being 2 worlds and the protagonist being able to travel between those 2 worlds. So the problem for me with this book, and a lot of people had said in the comments when I said I was going to read this, the bits set in the real world are good, the bits set in the fantasy world are not, and I agree with that assessment. So the problem with the fantasy world in this book is it's kind of, as the title suggests, to be fair to Stephen King, it's like a fairy tale world. It's a world that draws on lots of different fairy tales, and as a result, to me at least, it just feels a bit boring and childish, and I'm not particularly enjoying it. Now it's into fairy tale mode. I was really enjoying it when it was in like the real world, and I'm intrigued to see what happens with the central character, but to be honest, I don't love the central character either, which is maybe part of the problem too. So I am going to persevere and finish it, I think. But yeah, I'm not loving it, sadly. So an unusual duffer from King for me. I normally really like his books, but this one is not doing it for me at the moment. So that's everything I've read this week then, and I'm reading. In terms of channel stuff then, so in the last week you've had a review of The Dancing Men by Duncan Cole, which is a book I buddy read with my dad. You've had my May wrap up, so talking about all the books I read in May. I think it was 27 in the end. And you've had a video where I talk about the cursed movie trope, my favourite horror book trope. So cursed movie books and 10 recommendations for you of ones I've enjoyed. And then in the week ahead, you're going to get an unboxing for a new e-ink device I've just received, the Bigme B7, which is really interesting. So it's a 7-inch colour e-reader, like e-ink screen, but the twist with this one is it's got a SIM card slot. So it's got a 4G modem built into it. You can put a SIM card in it, which means you can use it to do anything you want when you're out and about as well. So quite an interesting device. So I've got an unboxing and first impressions video for that. I've been using it for a lot of my digital reading this week and enjoying it. You're going to get a book haul video as well, so including a load of books I bought for that challenge I'm doing in July, where I'm going to read books that have been recommended to me by viewers. And then 2 more videos. I'm not entirely sure what they're going to be yet. So you'll definitely get a review probably of Survivor by JF Gonzalez, and then hopefully one other video as well, but I'm not quite sure what that's going to be yet. Anyway, that's me done for this week. Hope you've enjoyed the video. Hope you've had a good reading week. Let me know in the comments what you've been reading. Let me know if you've read any of the books I talked about. And as always, thanks very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.